All of this socialism, KKK, BLM, and I just want to grill for God's sakes. No wiser words have been spoken than the words in this boomer Facebook meme that has, because it's a boomer Facebook meme, probably been shared to you 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 times over. But no truer words have been spoken. And much like any commonly held sentiment that's repeated time in and time out, it might be being repeated because it is true. And in this case, it is true. Now, why do I resonate with this image so much? I think it's primarily because our brains have been colonized. Our brains have been colonized by media moguls and various figures in social media who actively profit off of our division and polarization. Being it the people on the left who want you to fall as narrowly down partisan lines as humanly possible by believing that something as absurd as a trans genocide is occurring right now. By the way, it's not. Or something as equally absurd as the United States being a theocracy, in spite of the fact that the United States is literally a secular country with a constitution that guarantees separation of church and state. These are just a few of the claims that the radical left today are putting out all over the internet, primarily because of their modern-day equivalent of Rush Limbaugh, that being Vosh, promoting these claims because they line his pockets. The fear of those individuals coming into his chat room every single day to hear about what things they should be afraid of today or this week, those people are lining his pockets. And that's why he does this, because he knows that they're going to come there to get their daily dose of fear. And just the same dynamic is playing out on the right, where they're constantly telling us to be afraid of groups of people because of their immigration documentation status, because of immutable characteristics related to their race or ethnic background, due to their gender dysphoria and decisions that they make about their own body. These people are being villainized, and their mere existence has been weaponized by the right in an attempt to drum up as much fear and, yes, dollars as possible from people who lean a little bit conservative. And there's nothing wrong with leaning a little bit conservative, much like there is nothing wrong with leaning a little bit left. But the problem that is happening in this country today, the thing that is destroying our society at the seams, is polarization. This notion that it is us against them, that there are some irreconcilable differences between us, our fellow Americans, that we are not united, that instead we must have a national divorce between red and blue states merely because we disagree with one another. This is dangerous. This is exactly the kind of rhetoric that stoked divisions between the people of our great nation in the Civil War. Now, unlike some polarizing figures online, I am not going to come out here and say some nonsense like a new civil war is about to occur. But this is dangerous, and you could argue that it leads to acts of real-world violence, both from the left and from the right, because it's going out and saying these are not human beings that are disagreeing with us for wrong but perhaps reasonable reasons, that these are instead an occupying force, a conniving, evil entity. On the right, you have this group of people, the left, their enemy, as they put it, being talked about in almost existential or biblical terms. They're referred to as Satan-worshiping, as pedophilic. They're referred to as an existential threat to the very fabric of this country. About half of the country, by many of these polarizing figures, have been written off as fundamentally un-American. When not so long ago, we could talk about our differences, we could have a difference in opinion on a number of issues, but we could all get along at the end of the day over the fact that we are Americans at our core, that we love freedom, that we love this country, and that we love the opportunities that have been afforded to us. Even the people who believe that that idea of equal opportunity has been a lie or perhaps a misrepresentation promoted by our culture, even those people would default to a belief in that fundamentally American notion. They would say, yes, America is a great country, and it is a country that aspires to be an equal place for all, where everybody can make a living and live a happy life if they so choose to, if they work at it. But then that person would say, well, okay, we're not succeeding at that aspiration at this particular time, but let's institute some policies that can allow us to live up to that ideal, to be the best America that we know that we can be. That was the rhetoric. And now, people who purport to believe in policies that would help us to live up to those aspirations are being demonized and villainized on the right as un-American, as not patriotic, as an existential threat to the very fabric of this country. And so I hear this fearful, polarizing rhetoric coming from more and more normal people on both sides, and I can't help but feel as though this is going to tear so many more of us apart. I mean, look at the dinner table at Thanksgiving or at Christmas. Just having family members there who disagree with you politically is joked about time and time again because of the massive arguments that it can start, even leading to family members walking out of the room or canceling or not wanting to continue. Why can't we all just sit at the dinner table together without hurling these accusations at one another, without demonizing and dehumanizing one another on political lines? Isn't there a respectable middle that we can see between all of us, no matter how extreme our views are? Your views can be extreme. You know, they can be pretty out there even, but if they result in calls to violence or the dehumanization of your fellow citizens, I think that's beyond the pale. That is unacceptable. And unfortunately, on both sides now, we have normalized these un-American tendencies, these polarizing tendencies that I fear might lead to more real-world violence. I mean, look at that fella, Daniel Perry, I believe is his name. And now that governor down there in Texas is trying to pardon him. He's trying to pardon him for the murder of a Black Lives Matter protester when he literally said that he was going to go out there to maybe kill some people. He ran a red light, which is already a crime, to drive into a protest that was on the road. You know, it is not legal to run into anyone. Of course he didn't, but he very well could have with that many people on the street. It's not legal to run a red light. It's definitely not legal to shoot someone merely for bearing arms as their Second Amendment right guarantees. And that's what that guy he shot was doing. He was holding an AK-47, not pointing it at him, not aiming it. He was merely exercising his Second Amendment right to bear arms, and he was open carrying, as law allowed him to do. This man, Perry, shot him. He shot him and then said to the cops that he wanted to shoot him before he had the chance to aim his weapon at him. And if you're feeling threatened by a person who is peacefully protesting, who has not even aimed a weapon at you, merely because of their political affiliation, I think that is because of this rhetoric. Because this rhetoric has led to us believing, or those of us who are on the right, it's led to us believing that The other side is an existential threat, that they are dangerous because of what they believe. And I think that kind of rhetoric culminates into real-world acts of violence like that, where maybe that guy really did think he was defending himself, even though he was not. Legally, he was not. Maybe he thought he was, because he's been trained to see these people as an existential threat. And this happens on the left, too. This happens on the left, too, with these incredibly irresponsible commentators going out and saying that a group of people who have disproportionately higher suicide rates than the rest of the population, I'm talking about trans people, should go ahead and arm themselves in self-defense against a non-existent genocide that is quote-unquote occurring. The idea that this will not, at some point, culminate in violence, I think is completely and utterly ludicrous. We have not seen it yet, but just you wait. There's going to be some trans woman who is afraid for her life because some guy is just holding a weapon, and then she's going to do exactly the same thing that Daniel Perry did. And we may not have seen that yet, but I think we're going to, because of this extreme and polarizing rhetoric. Now, I don't disagree that there are figures on the far right who are using rhetoric that implicitly calls for something akin to a genocide, namely that one figure who at CPAC called for the quote-unquote total eradication of trans people. This is dangerous stuff, but it's equally dangerous to be polarizing in the other direction, and in so doing claim that reality is something that it is literally not. We need to be objective about these things, and we need to be sounding the alarm when extremism is occurring, but that goes for both sides. I am sick and tired of seeing my fellow Americans vilified, villainized, and polarized by this rhetoric, this discourse, and this current political climate. I just want to grill, for God's sakes. And I think you should want to as well.